So continuing with our discussion about how the markers are placed on the map. So we said that there's a detail and the detail contains the address as well. Then so after we've added the marker called M1, we bring the marker into view by saying view markers, and then we set the zoom to the zoom level to 17. So this is the function that actually puts the marker on the map, but this function now needs to be called in quite a few different places. And so let's take a look at all the different places where we want this JavaScript function to be called. So clearly what we want is when the focus changes, when the active row in the repeating section changes, we want to call the function to set the marker. Clearly when we edit a row and change an address, we'd like to call the marker. And when we navigate from one parent record to the next parent record, we want to call the marker. So there's quite a few different places where we want to call this function to set the marker. So let's go through them now. So go back to client-side code, and you can see here that the first place where we're calling it is in the on repeating section row change. So that means that when the focus row in the repeating section changes, we'd like to call the function to set the markers. Then this method here, which is the after populate from table, this method is called when a callback is completed and you've populated the data in the dialog from the underlying table. So for example, when I first display the component, we've gone back to the server to get the data to display in the dialog, and when all of that data has been sent back to the client, this method here, after populate from table, is called. But you can see that we've actually wrapped the call to this function in a timeout just to give the map enough breathing space to actually finish its initialization before we call the set map event. So the final place where we'd like to call the set map function is on this when the user commits the data. So after you make a change, after you save any changes to the table, you can see here that what we've got is a after save, which is a client-side event. We're going to call the set map function over here. Notice that we didn't put in the open paren, close paren, because we're just specifying the name of the JavaScript function, not the actual JavaScript itself to execute. So when the marker is saved, when the record is saved, excuse me, we're going to call this set map function in the after save client-side event. But when the record is saved, we also need to geocode it. So you can see here that that in the save submitted data to tables builder here, we specified that we'd like to geocode the record. So here's the definition. The address information comes from these controls in the repeating section row, and then we would like to update the fields in this alias, the delivery address alias, and we'd like to update the lat field, the long field, and also location, which is a geography field, so that we can do geography searches later on if we so desire. So every time now we save this record, we're going to be geocoding the information and filling in the lat and long for the current address. So let's pause now and then pick this up in the next video.